Minister Andrew Mitchell for the second time in a row.
Dr. Huck, may I say at once that it is a great privilege for only the second time in our joint parliamentary careers to appear before you today. I am extremely grateful to my right honourable friend, the member for South West Devon, for securing this debate and for his tireless work supporting the development of dementia-friendly communities. We must ensure that reform and recovery efforts in Ukraine meet the needs and priorities of the entire population, including vulnerable and marginalised groups. And he has set out with great eloquence today a plea in support of one of them. Now, Dr. Huck, the Minister for Europe, would have been delighted to take part in this debate, but I'm afraid he is currently in Uzbekistan on ministerial business, and it therefore is my pleasure to respond on behalf of the government. The impact of Russia's illegal and unprovoked invasion has been devastating for the Ukrainian people. Families, children, elderly and disabled people are forced to make ends meet while sheltering from Russian missiles. And my right honourable friend set out in graphic terms what this means for some families. We know that the disruption caused by the war poses significant risks for social, political and economic stability in Ukraine, and that the insecurity across the front lines has made it extremely difficult for humanitarian organisations to establish a sustained presence and support those who need it most. The war has severely impacted livelihoods and income, placing huge strains on Ukraine's social safety net system. The poverty rate increased from 5.5% in 2021 to 24.1% in 2022, thereby increasing the demand for social assistance. At least a quarter of Ukraine's population, Dr. Huck, was over the age of 60 before the Russian invasion. As a result, Ukraine has the largest percentage of older people affected by conflict in the world. About 80% of single older Ukrainians...
There's a division in the chamber, so what's that, 40... 47? We're going to... Right, so first division suspension of 15 minutes. How many votes? Do we know, anyone? One. How many votes? Any idea? 15 minutes for the first, 10 minutes for anything subsequent.
Where's a whip when you want one?
Oh, for goodness sake, what are these people like? How many are we expecting? Who knows? Multiple. Oh, my gosh. OK, can you do the math? 47 for the first, and then 10 multiples of 10 are easy for each subsequent. OK, so back here at... Actually, no, 40, not 7, 48.
No, it's 47 because it's
47, OK. 47 plus every 10 minutes for every vote. Ah. So, Minister, the new completely hard stop is 20 past on that clock. So it's come, yeah. So 9 minutes left, is it? Yep. Minister!
As I was saying, Dr. Huck, before we were interrupted by divisions elsewhere in the House, about 80% of single, older Ukrainians live below the poverty line, and many are reliant on their pension as their sole income. Older people, particularly those living with health conditions such as dementia, struggle to evacuate and face barriers in accessing health services and social support. In the Foreign Office's Disability Rights and Inclusion Strategy, we have committed to a life course approach, striving to protect the rights of all people at all stages of their lives. We must recognise that older people and people with disabilities are experts in their own lives, and their full, active and meaningful participation in decision-making is critical for a recovery that meets their needs. If I turn now to British action in this respect, to date we have pledged almost £5 billion in non-military support to Ukraine, which includes funding for humanitarian aid, social protection and disability inclusion and rehabilitation services. In 2022, we established a civil society grant fund to support organisations, including those helping vulnerable and marginalised groups. Last year in June, along with Ukraine, we co-hosted the Ukraine Recovery Conference in London. Not only did this raise over $60 billion in international support for Ukraine's immediate reconstruction and long-term recovery, but our advocacy also supported the government of Ukraine to create a civil society dialogue platform for gender and inclusive reform. And I had the honour, Dr. Huck, of both attending and speaking at that conference. Through our multi-donor Perekid initiative, we are working with the Ukraine Ministry of Social Protection and UNICEF to strengthen Ukraine's social protection systems and services. On the 23rd of November last year, our ambassador in Ukraine spoke at a Help Age International event on age-inclusive reform and recovery, where the Deputy Minister of Ukraine's Ministry of Social Policy joined him on the panel. In his intervention, our ambassador was clear that the war has hit older people the hardest and that they must play a crucial role in Ukraine's recovery. Britain supports the inclusive policies and programmes which meet their needs. We must give older people a voice and recognise their role in rebuilding their lives and communities. And my honourable friend made very clear the priority that we all expect to be attached to that. We are also funding the WHO, which will partner with Help Age International to conduct an updated national survey analysing the barriers and risks to older people in Ukraine related to healthcare. The WHO aims to provide humanitarian services to older people in the most affected oblasts of Ukraine, including support for their basic needs and case management of older people to access health and social services. During his visit to Washington last month, the Foreign Secretary announced further programme allocations, including about £8 million for humanitarian activities, focusing on the needs of the most vulnerable in Ukraine, such as older people and people with disabilities. We will continue to support the government of Ukraine in pursuing recovery, reconstruction and modernisation that puts people at its heart. Dr. Huck, our diplomatic response has been comprehensive. We've helped build a united international coalition against Russia's invasion and in support of Ukraine. And Russia remains internationally isolated, having lost 18 international elections in 2022 and 2023. The United Nations General Assembly vote in February last year demonstrated that the international community is overwhelmingly united behind Ukraine, with nearly three-quarters of the entire membership voting for Russia's immediate withdrawal and an end to the war. And we've also worked with allies to strengthen NATO, expedite membership for Finland and Sweden, and provide long-term NATO assistance for Ukraine. Without that activity, Dr. Huck, none of the things which my honourable friend has spoken about will be possible. So if I may conclude, reform and recovery efforts in Ukraine must be inclusive and take into account the needs of the ageing population. We will continue to work with our allies to ensure that Ukraine gets the support it needs to win this war, secure a lasting peace, and build back better. We commend the bravery and resilience of the Ukrainian people in the face of Russian aggression, and we remain united across the House in our desire for them to prevail. To my honourable friend and his eloquent request today for support for a very good cause, may I pledge the interest and help from officials in the Foreign Office to advance that cause. I cannot promise him that, as he suggested, there might be some pot of money that might be available. But what I can promise him is that he and I share the same desire to drive forward this agenda, and we will do everything we can to help him in that respect. I remain, Dr. Huck, confident that this will continue, and Ukraine can always count on the UK to stand by them.
The question is that this House has considered the potential merits of UK support for dementia